It's a Duke-Houston rematch of last year's Sweet 16 game. The difference this time, I can guarantee you Jamal Shead ain't getting hurt.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into this Locked On College Basketball edition, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade. You're joining me at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making us your first listen or watch, and want to remind you that you can catch every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all the everydayers joining us and all the great members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. Coming up on the show today, we got a fun little thing we're doing today and tomorrow. We're doing a roundtable discussion with our local hosts in the Final Four. So today, we're going right side roundtable. We got the winners of the Midwest region, the Houston Cougars. And yes, I said all those vowels weirdly. And the great host of Locked On Coogs, Mr. Parker Ainsworth. And we got the victors of the East region, Mr. JJ Jackson, host of Locked On Blue Devils. For those of you watching on YouTube, you see that I'm in the middle of the screen because I got to keep these dudes separate so we don't get into any boxing matches. And then coming up tomorrow's show, we will have both Locked On Auburn's host, Zach Blackerby, and Locked On Gators host, Brandon Olson. Going to be a lot of fun to have these guys help us get ready for the game. So here's how we're going to approach this. We're going to start by looking at things when Duke has the ball. What is Duke going to try to do offensively? What will Houston attempt to do to stop that? Then we'll flip things. What is Houston going to do to try to score the basketball? And then what will Duke do to try to attempt to stop that? When we get to the end, we're going to look X factors, score predictions, all sorts of other storylines like that. But boys, we got to get right into this thing. So let's start. Duke has the basketball in their hands. JJ, we're going to start with you. What is the approach? What is the attack for Jon Scheyer's club here?
Yeah, I think it is. People want to debate the Cooper Flagg of it all, and rightfully so. He's the best player in the sport for a reason. And I think the debate or the game plan for Duke offensively is going to be what it has been throughout the back half of the season. Duke's riding the second longest winning streak in the nation behind Houston's winning streak that they're currently on. And we're going to see this Duke team put the ball in Cooper's hands and let him create for others. That's what he loves to do. That's what he's really dynamic at doing. And I think that's exactly what we're setting up for here.
Okay, obviously there's more to unpack, but Parker, let's just go right back at it. How you hear that? What is the approach for Kelvin Sampson in this club?
I think what you're going to see out of Houston is a lot of doubling of basically every guard. Houston does a lot of high pressure defense and really tries. They do take risk and gambles. I don't mean to say they don't, but they help the helper in a lot of ways and that kind of stuff. I would also think that Cooper's probably going to have the most success as a perimeter guy in this game, just because of how much ball pressure is going to be. If it's anyone else with the ball out there, it might be hard to get in the ball down low just because of the feasibility of crossing the 3-point line, honestly, if he's not having it. JJ's watched him a lot more than I have, but I feel like, frankly, him being outside as a creator also might be their better creative option out there, as opposed to Proctor or Kneppel in this game. And that would be what I would assume if Sampson's game planning for. He's going to try and take Proctor and Kneppel away and then have options and things to fall into once Cooper's outside the 3-point line with the ball a lot more. That would be what I assume is going to happen schematically, but Sampson's also much smarter than I am. So,
It's interesting, Parker. It makes me think like, Duke, one of the things that I've kind of tried to look at this year, and JJ, I'm curious your response to this, is Duke doesn't necessarily have a true point guard, right? Tried to have Caleb Foster play that role. It just didn't work, JJ. We saw that earlier this season. And so now it's almost point guard by committee. Cooper Flagg's the leading assist man on this team. We see Sion James usually instigating the offense. But, is that a thing? Like, if there's the doubling, the forcing out of the guard's hands, how will Duke handle that?
Yeah, that's such a great point that you're making, Isaac, because I think we've been talking a lot about this throughout the year on Locked On Blue Devils. In so many ways, in so many games as of late, it feels like you've got Kamen Malawach at 7'2", who wins the opening jump ball, right? We give the ball to Sion James to bring it up the floor, and that's pretty much it. then it becomes the Cooper Flagg and the Con Knipple show to kind of get them into offense and that sort of thing. Now, sometimes in the half court, you'll see Sion James come over and try to set things up and initiate, but he's so big. He's such a great cutter off the ball, and finding out that Cooper Flagg is this just kind of one-on-one play creator for his team, Duke's just been so much more successful with letting him operate and set guys up. And then as of late, something that we've really noticed in the ACC tournament and now into the NCAA tournament, when Duke starts to run that Knipple and Malawach pick and roll, or even we've seen several Knipple and Gongba pick and rolls a little bit.
Yeah.
Ron Knipple is just as good of a creator in some ways as Cooper Flagg is. He's not getting the opportunities because Cooper Flagg has it all the time, and you'd much rather have Con, posting up outside, ready to knock down some 3-point shots when he gets those looks.
JJ, has anybody defended that well, that two-man game with Knipple and Malawach? Because every time I see it, it's like resulting in a dunk over and over and over again.
Themselves, it just when I think about some of the passes that a lot of times Duke will be overly aggressive, like this is working, let's keep doing this, because it's what the coaching staff and John Shire in particular has been preaching to them. Like, this guy's 7'2", throw the ball up to the rim. He's a freak athlete. Let him go and reach it and make the play. Sometimes the throw's not in the best spot. Sometimes Malawach can't quite finish, although that's rare. He's 20 of 23 from the floor in March Madness so far this year, and 2 of them were missed dunks. I mean, that's just uncharacteristic that this guy's going to do something like that, right? But, I mean, that has been instant offense, and I think that surprised a lot of people when you're going into an Alabama game and the opponent just hit 25 three-pointers. In some ways, you think you got to shoot with them. Duke walked away from that game having only made 6 3-pointers against the Crimson Tide. Yeah. It was still good enough to win because they found so much success going to the rim and throwing it up.
Parker, I know you were talking about that aggressive attacking doubling there of the guards. Is there any world in which Kelvin Sampson plays this straight up and says, we're not going to let some of that rotation stuff beat us? Maybe Cooper gets his, but we're going to try to stop everyone else from doing stuff? Or is that just so outside of his DNA that you don't see that happening?
Well, I don't think it's going to be because Sion James has the ball. Houston saw him a lot. I think Houston beat him 8 times when he was at Tulane, if I remember from my notes the other day.
I didn't think about that. That's a great point. Yeah.
And Tulane's a very different team, obviously.
Wait, hang on. You're telling me that Tulane is not as good as Duke? I find that abhorrent, sir.
The Duke of the boot, actually, is probably a good way to look at it. So when I look at the way that Houston does this, Braden Smith obviously had a great game from an assist standpoint against Houston. And honestly, that was one of the few times this season, but it was just last weekend, that I've seen them kind of back out of the idea of doubling and say, hey, we're just going to play straight up. They played TKR from Purdue straight up and said, hey, we've doubled him a couple times. It hadn't worked. We're just going to let Juwan Roberts go to work on him one-on-one, and we're just going to trust our 6-year guy. And that was one of the few times it's happened, and obviously it was good enough to win that game. A little bit different power forward matchup in this one, obviously. I still like Juwan a lot. I don't mean to say that it's like, a very one-sided affair. I think Juwan Roberts is the winningest player in Houston Cougar history for a reason.
Yeah.
A guy named Akeem Olajuwon came through. I think that's, pretty big deal, but
not familiar.
We can talk later. No, I feel like Houston may do that. They're going to start with the double stuff. They start with the double stuff against Purdue as well, and then adjust. And I will say, one of the things as a assistant basketball coach myself at a much lower level, I appreciated how prepared it was. Like a single timeout, and they knew what they were doing. I mean, they had clearly gone through it before. It's like, hey, call timeout. We're going to switch to this. We know what we're doing. Boom, next thing up. Right? It was very impressive to me in that instance.
I like it. Is there, and now I want to talk about this maybe a little bit more when we get to your offensive side, Parker, but with Duke being the tallest team in the nation, right? That presents a unique problem for a Houston front court that's 6'8" and 6'8" with Tugler and Juwan. But that's something Houston has clearly dealt with all season long, right? Like, there's a guy named Hunter Dickinson in the Big 12 that you've had to deal with. So what is it that Houston does to offset their lack of size defensively?
Well, there's the ball pressure before it ever gets low. We talked about that ad nauseum, so I don't want to go back into that. But they also have all these guys that are 6'8", 6'8", 6'7", They have 5 guys that have an over 7-foot wingspan. The Jojo Tugler being the most impressive at 6'8" with a 7'6" wingspan. They're long, they're rangy. On top of the Houston culture and Sampson, the grit, the grind, the run around, the hustle. They're also, with their wingspan, able to get to the ball a lot of times where you don't realize it doesn't feel like they're 6'8", right? They may not be 7'2". I mean, like that's obviously a little bit extreme, but they can make up for a lot of it with just long arms and hustle plays that I think it's hard to really quantify until you see it happen to the combination of Dickinson and Badinga at Kansas, right? I mean, they got kind of outsized and they're both 7 feet tall. It's a very different kind of look.
I think Tugler, his lamb chops, his mutton chops on the side of his face actually add 2 more inches to that wingspan. Just it looks more intimidating, right? JJ, last word in this segment, and then we're going to move on. Who is Duke's leading scorer in this basketball game?
Wow. That's a great question because it's kind of varied throughout the course of the tournament. I think
that's why I'm asking it.
And that's a great question for you to ask. I do think we'll see more of Cooper Flagg initiating like he did in some of the earlier round games. I don't think we're going to see the 30 ball that he had against Arizona in a game like that. So I'm flipping back and forth between Proctor and Knipple, but I'm going to ride it high with Knipple probably being the leading guy for Duke.
I think that's who I would go with as well. The problem maybe for Houston is the fact that we're having trouble deciding on that. Now we're going to flip the script here and look at when Houston has the basketball, what things are going to look like as Duke works at guarding them. We'll get to that conversation coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Supply House, get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. Do you need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service. You'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for that extra edge, their free TradeMaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now it's your turn. Join the TradeMaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM to start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's all coming at you from supplyhouse.com. Now we have stolen the ball out of the clutches of the Duke Blue Devils and handed it over to Kelvin Sampson's, or Kevin Sampson's, as he was talking about with that Gonzaga press conference whole shebang, whatever that was. Give the ball to Kelvin Sampson's squad. Parker, how will this Houston Cougars offense attack the Duke Blue Devils defense?
I'd imagine it starts with one of their 3 backcourt guys shooting a bunch of threes. I can't tell you which one is necessarily going in because it's been somewhat different every game, but they've got 3 different guys shooting over 40% from behind the arc. And what I've loved about covering this team all year long, unlike previous iterations of Houston, is kind of going into each game, they just find the match that they like and take it. It was Emmanuel Sharp in the Big 12 tournament, most outstanding player in that tournament. It was Milos Uzan against Purdue. It was LJ Cryer against Gonzaga. Everyone's kind of had their turn. And so it really, I feel like it's going to be dictated by who Duke chooses to cover and how they cover it, because any of those guys can give you 25 on any given night. I really feel pretty confident that someone's going to have a scoring day in this game. I just don't know necessarily which one of those 3 backcourt guys it is. It could also end up being Joanne Roberts, although I wonder if that's necessarily the route they go or not. But I feel like one of those 3 guys is going to hit a few threes and really push this offense open.
Okay, JJ, what's interesting about that to me is Houston right now, if I'm remembering correctly, is 5th in the nation in 3-point percentage. The interesting thing is that they don't take a ton of them. The other thing with Houston is with that 3-guard attack that Parker's talking about there, I expect to look at this Houston team and be like, man, they get to the free throw line so much. The free throw rate is not that high, as Parker well knows, right? It's like bottom 200s, Parker, right? Like 297th in free throw rate, something like that.
It was somewhere around there before the tournament. I hadn't checked it since. We haven't shot a lot of free throws in the tournament either, though.
Yeah. And then so I'm like, okay, so maybe Houston's out here getting a bunch of 2s. Well, they shoot a lot more 2s, but that percentage is lower. And JJ, as you probably well know, Duke is like 4th in the nation in 2-point field goal defense. So is that what you're looking at too, JJ, as you see this is like, oh man, Houston's going to have to just shoot a bunch of threes, and that's how they're going to try to beat us.
Yeah, in some ways, yes. I think also that would have been what I was saying and thinking going into the Alabama game.
Exactly.
Right? And they attempt 51 in that tournament game against BYU, and then Alabama ends up going 8 for 32 and even 25% from three-point range and nearly 20 fewer attempts from the outside, just because being the tallest team in America, we're talking wingspans a moment ago with this Houston team. Being tall helps Duke in that regard as well, and these guards are able to impact passing lanes and really try to move guys off of that three-point line. So stylistically, I think Duke is going to do everything they can to not turn this into the three-point shooting game that it is and force Houston into taking some of those tougher twos and say, hey, you haven't been that great at going to the free throw line. Let's put officials into this at some point. Let's see if the calls are going to be there. Let's see what truly happens when we move this game closer to the rim and see if the size can play out.
How does that size affect things, JJ? I mean, because we saw it with Bama. I think I said it on we recorded Parker, our ACC squad show earlier on Tuesday night as we're recording here. And one of the things we were talking about was Duke not only stopped Alabama from makes from the three-point line, but takes as well. So what is it they did to limit just even the looks for Alabama, and how could that be instructive for this game?
I mean, they were switching everything. At first, Duke was only switching 1 through 4, and they had Common Malawach kind of in his drop like he typically is. He's ready to get rebounds and do that. And after the first couple of 2 media timeouts or so, Aiden Sherrill had come off the bench for Alabama at the 5, knocked down 2 3-pointers, and John Shire immediately called a timeout and immediately said, we're switching everything. Oh. And that's one of the wrinkles that excites me. I'll get to kind of X factors a little bit later, but just the coaching matchup in this. I think they're both brilliant minds in the game of basketball, and I think we're going to see a lot of kind of chess moving as this game plays out. But that's been the biggest thing for me, is that Duke does feel comfortable even with the 7-2 Malawach. If this game was played early in the year, that would not be the case. But as the season has gone, he has gotten so much better at being comfortable out there on the perimeter. And so we're totally fine switching things, not going under screens when needed and letting it play out that way.
Parker, JJ just talked about Common Malawach. I love getting to that because he's not the leading shot blocker on this Duke team. That is Cooper Flagg, who just name a statistical category and guess that Cooper Flagg's the leader in it, and you'll be right. But how, you talked about these guards, and you mentioned still in the tournament, right? Have not been getting to the free throw line a ton. Can they flip that identity and go at Common Malawach, get into his body, not let him get extended, and not let him, affect shots at the same way? Like, how can they handle that?
I think obviously attacking a big guy in his body is the best way to attack any shot blocker. I don't, again, I'm not a very high level basketball coach, and I can tell you that, right? But I think that a lot of this also comes down to like Houston and the way they play offense is they intentionally will take 25 seconds to find a shot. And their goal is we're playing a total of 65 possessions apiece, boss. And we're going to see how efficient you are in yours and we'll be as efficient as we can in ours. And I think that's where you see a lot of these like low free throw games and stuff like that pop up, just because they aren't having a whole lot of possessions either. And I understand, like, obviously these are all 4 of the top 10 rated KenPom teams of all time. I mean, any one of these 4 teams could take over and dictate the pace. But Houston's offense, when they have the ball, is going to be very focused on controlling that pace, finding good shots after the 20-second mark, and those kinds of things. And then, frankly, at that point, you're talking about attacking, and it might only be 4 free throws here, 4 free throws there. But when the game is so short, those free throws feel a lot different than they do when the game is 75, 80 possessions long, right? And so it's a very different feel, even if it's only quantitatively 4 free throws.
Parker, because of a little bit of the lack of size compared to Duke's, Monstars, if we're thinking space jamminess here, is there a world in which a bigger guy like Terrence Arsenault plays more of a role in this game than he would in other moments?
I actually think it'll be interesting to see if Houston plays the small lineup for long periods of time. So Houston has gone to different points where they'll play one of their 3 bigs at the center spot and play Terrence Arsenault or Malik Wilson sometimes both, as a quasi forward kind of guy. Terrence is another guy, 6'6" with a 7'1" wingspan, just kind of crazy long out there, right? But he is a great defender and rebounder, and he has moments where he's a really great scorer. I think that the biggest deal with Terrence in this would be like, we mentioned Cooper on the other side of the ball. When Houston's got the ball, it's another kind of guy to throw at him offensively. Cooper's got to come out and cover him. That pulls him away from the rim, right? Like those kinds of things I think could be important for Houston if they go to the small lineup, because pulling Cooper away from the rim, as athletic as he obviously gets to the rim very quickly, but that gives you that split seconds to get there before he meets you at the rim in a different kind of way than if he's guarding a power forward, Juwan Roberts, 10 feet from the basket.
JJ, I know we don't have many opportunities for this. Well, honestly, with either of your teams, they were a combined 49-2 in calendar year 2025. It's absurd. Houston's lone loss being that freak loss to Texas Tech, the Blue Devils' lone loss being that loss at Clemson. JJ, when teams have been successful offensively against Duke, I don't want to just ask Parker, like, how does Houston do this? I want to ask you, like, how can a team be successful offensively against Duke? What was it in that Clemson game? What was it when Georgia Tech got up there in the quarterfinals of the ACC tournament? What did North Carolina do in the second half of the semifinals that let them get back in?
I think a lot of shot making has gone a long way. That feels like an obvious answer, but when you look at a game like Arizona that Duke just had in the Sweet 16, 93 points is the most that Duke had given up all season long. They win that game because they fortunately had Cooper Flagg, who scored 30, and they had 100 total as a team. But Caleb Love walked away from that game with 35 points on the night and just could not be stopped in so many ways. And some of the shots he was making, it was just unbelievable. I think that's had a lot to do with it. The Georgia Tech game in the ACC tournament, so much of that I truly do believe was Duke had a really off shooting night in the first half, and then they had kind of the injuries to deal with to Malik Brown and to Cooper Flagg. So that's something that I think kind of kept Georgia Tech in that game. But I think that's where teams have had a lot of success offensively, is just simply when they can get those shots from the outside to go and try to create a little separation that way. Although, we mentioned those Houston guards. Houston is one of only two teams in the entire NCAA tournament field that had three starting guards shooting better than 40% from three-point range. The other team was Duke. So if we want to get into this three-point contest like that, it's so even across the board in how you're looking at so many of these things, which is interesting to me.
Man, it's going to be fun. Parker, last question. Same thing I asked JJ to wrap his offensive segment. Who is Houston's leading scorer in this basketball game?
I'm thinking it's going to be Emmanuel. We talk about three-point shooting contest. Emmanuel has led them on points a handful of times in the last month, has had a really good postseason run, both Big 12 and NCAA tournament play. He is a shooter that takes about 0.2 of a second to get one off. I mean, he
scares me the most. He does.
And truthfully, I think the other deal is he can spot up at about 30, 34 feet. And when these other guys attack, it doesn't take a lot of defensive help to leave him open for spaces. He doesn't need a lot. He catches it from a long way away and knocks it down. And of the guys shooting the ball from behind the arc of over 40%, he's the one that has had the least amount of off days. He's had days with less attempts, like we've talked about, but he has not had like 0-for-8 kind of days or anything like that on the season. He's the guy that I think will sneakily come in a backdoor kind of way and have, he could end up with 21. So just something just because he goes 7 of 10 from 3 or something crazy, right?
Yeah. All right, boys, we got to get to some X factors. We got to get to the youth versus the experience, both in terms of coaching and players. All of that coming up to wrap the show. And of course, predictions from our guys all coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Monarch Money, do you ever check your bank account and you're like, hey, where'd all my money go? Between dining out and online shopping and entertainment, it's really easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start actually building wealth. Because instead of juggling a whole bunch of different apps, you can use Monarch as a one-stop shop to check your finances, to track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. My wife and I, we always want to make sure that we are aligned and on the same page when it comes to finances. And thankfully, with Monarch Money, it makes managing that so much smoother. You can track your shared accounts, your personal accounts. You can set goals and stay on the same page without the stress. I love that. So take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at Monarch Money for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Isaac Shade here leading the way today with our two guys. We've got Mr. Parker Ainsworth from Locked On Coogs and Mr. JJ Jackson, host of Locked On Blue Devils. We're going to kind of have a few superlatives here, and then we'll make game predictions and get out of here. But the beginning of this conversation is the interesting nature of Duke being the youngest team of these four by a good margin, and Coach Shire being a third-year head coach, where Coach Sampson, what was it you told me earlier today, JJ Jackson, started coaching when John Shire was 4 months old?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's bonkers. So talk about how those kind of things, both with players and coaches, will factor in. JJ, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I'm excited to see that play out. I'm excited. Earlier this week, John Shire was asked about kind of Kelvin Sampson in the program in the Sweet 16 game that we saw last year. By the way, 54-51 was the final score in that one. I would be shocked if this game is as low scoring as that one is, given the Duke offense. But John Shire was asked about Sampson, the coach, and talked about before his very first season as the Duke basketball head coach, he wanted to put together those, remember secret scrimmages when those were a big thing we were doing a couple of years ago? It was Kelvin Sampson in Houston that he reached out to because of the respect that he had for their defense. Houston won that secret scrimmage, although I don't know how we know that because it was secret. But I do love kind of the X's and O's chess piece matchup that we're going to have for both of these coaches.
Hart?
Yeah, I don't know what scrimmage you're talking about. It was totally secret, never happened. There's no pictures from it. I think that the youth and experience aspect of this is fascinating on the coaching and playing side. Obviously, Cooper Flagg is a generational, soon-to-be lottery #1 overall pick and all that. But, like, there's Carmelo Anthony and, like, Kevin Durant went out in the second weekend, right? Like how those things turn out is never – I mean, obviously Duke is different than the Texas team was or whatever, right? But it does bear mentioning that, like, sometimes the experience wins out. Houston's got a national champion and 4-time Big 12 champion L.J. Cryer. There's Juwan Roberts' second Final Four as well. The list goes on. They've got a lot of guys, a lot of mileage in this one. And I think that at some point, like, the celebration after they won the Elite Eight game was pretty muted. Like, this was kind of expected from Houston in a lot of ways, as I'm sure Duke has had a stellar season and thought so too. I think these are two teams that, like, are age aside, just ready to be here. They've been looking for San Antonio for a long time.
I love that both of these teams have a player with Final Four experience, albeit in a different jersey. In fact, there are 3 players in this Final Four with that. Obviously, for Houston, it's L.J. Cryer, as Parker just talked about, who was with Baylor. For Duke, it's Mason Gillis, who was in the national championship game last year with Purdue. And then on the other side, it's Elijah Martin at Florida, who was on that FAU team that 2 years ago made that crazy run. Pretty cool stuff. What are you doing, Auburn? Where's your Final Four experience with some guy from another team? We're going to have to ask Zach about why they suck at having one of those guys on tomorrow's show. All right, guys, X Factor player, first superlative. We're going to go reverse order what we did last time. Parker, you start.
X Factor for me is going to be Malik Wilson again. And I guess you really just say the 4-guard lineup. If they can come in and actually play defensively with 4 guards against this team, they're going to have a lot of success on offense with it. And so the deal will be is, like, are they bleeding points on the other end playing that small, or can they really get away with it? They've gotten away with a lot this season. They hadn't played a Duke yet this season, but I do think that will be kind of a dictating factor in how much success Houston has and where they have it. So I'm going to go with Malik.
I like it. Jay?
I'm going to go Sion James. I think he's been paramount in so many of the big games that Duke has had this year. I think when he scores, it adds another dynamic to this Duke team. Again, he's a guy that is shooting over 40% from three-point range. He gets after it on the defensive end of the floor, and he's just built to kind of match up really well with those big body guards that Houston has.
Let's look at an X Factor stat. So we talked to X Factor players, but a stat – something that will change the tide of this game that maybe people aren't looking at. Park, I'll come back to you first.
Yeah, that's scary. Anyway, I was going to say Duke's offensive rebounds, if they're rebounding the ball with that size offensively, And I feel like, that's going to be a problem for Houston because Houston hasn't had that problem all year. If I'm being honest, even when they played Auburn's the only team that beat them in regulation this season. Even in that game, Houston was able to control and keep Auburn off the offensive glass, right? And so I think that would be worrisome if Duke's size somehow led to them doing that. But outside of that, I think that you're going to see things that don't show up in stats. This is going to be a big deal, actually, in this game.
JJ, X Factor stat.
Yeah, Isaac, I really don't have much to add here. I think Parker stole it from me. I do think when it looks at the rebounding battle, and in particular, can Duke get those extra possessions given their size? That's huge to me.
I love it. All right, boys. FanDuel, our great partner FanDuel, has this game, Duke -4.5. Parker, how's it going?
I'm not quite going to 54-51, but I do think Houston wins a low-scoring game here. I'm thinking it's really a one-possession game that feels like 2 after free throws, right? So like in that 4-5 area. You know what I'm talking about? Where like they foul, so it actually finishes at 4 or 5 or whatever. I think it's that kind of close. Houston was a shot away and a good look from tying up this game last year in the Sweet 16 after all the Jamal Shead injury and all that. I did check. The Raptors are not playing Saturday, so Jamal Shead cannot get hurt Saturday. I think Houston wins like a 4-point game somewhere in the 60s.
Parker, would you say, just in a word, does it have to be low scoring for Houston to win?
No, they can score a lot of points if the game goes up and down. If they're going to control the game, that's not what they're going to choose to do by any stretch.
I love that. All right, Jay, what's your call on the score here?
I'm going to follow suit. I'm going to back my guys. I like Duke going into this one. I think 74-67, more of a high-scoring affair for both of these teams, but that's kind of the range that I'm thinking.
I love it. I want to thank you both so much for joining me with our right side roundtable. Bracket jumbled in my head, fellas. Right side roundtable coming at you here on Wednesday. Massive thanks to Mr. Parker Ainsworth from Locked On Coogs, Mr. JJ Jackson from Locked On Blue Devils. Folks, make sure you go follow both their shows for great insight and preparation ahead of this matchup on Saturday. And then for one of them, we won't hear any more preparation after that game. But for the other, make sure you continue to follow their preparation ahead of Monday's national championship game, while the other will be bemoaning things and talking about transfer portal, just like I am as the host of Locked On Tar Heels. Guys, thanks so much for joining us here today. So fun to have this conversation. If you haven't subscribed to Locked On College Basketball, make sure you do that right now. If you're not part of the Locked On College Basketball Discord, we'd love to have you there. That link is in the show notes. As always, I got to say apologies to the lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Shouts to McBruins. And until next time, peace. Nice.
Awesome.